right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on how to manage your dam with our very special guests from Stacks. A little bit of administrivia. Today's session will be recorded. All attendees are muted, and you can ask questions at any time using the questions panel towards the bottom of your Zoom window, and we will answer those towards the end of the presentation. So I am Suzie Fountain, Senior Customer Success Manager and Team Lead at IntelligenceBank. And with us today are our very special guests from Stacks. We have Maddy Synoground, hopefully I got that right after asking you earlier, who's a dam manager, and Andrea Barrera, who's also a dam manager. So turning it over to the Stacks team, first off, we would love to just hear a little bit about who Stacks are and what you guys do.
Yeah, so we started back in 2018 as a small team. Since then, we've grown into a larger team of dam professionals, and our main goal is to make dam easy for our clients. We work with all types of different brands and organizations to help them optimize their digital content. And through that helps them optimize or make their processes more efficient and increase their return on investment. The way we approach that is different for each client, depending on how far in the started their dam journey. So some of the services that we offer are like dam therapy, fractional dam management, which is just like a part-time dam manager. And then we also help implement builds for some of our clients who just started with their dam.
Dam therapy, I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you. So for anyone who is new on the call or new to IntelligenceBank on the call, a little bit of background. We started back in 2009. And our vision is to transform marketing operations by bridging the gap between efficiency and compliance. Our award-winning content governance platform includes digital asset management, or DAM software, that helps organizations unleash the power of their content and digital assets while solving those governance issues that almost every organization faces. We also have an online brand hub portal to really bring your brand to life with online brand guidelines and end-to-end brand management. And then finally, we have our marketing operations platform, which helps you streamline campaigns to work faster and, again, stay compliant. We currently have more than 650,000 users globally, over 350,000 briefs under management. And ultimately, who we are is marketers who make software for marketers. For today's webinar, we're going to go over kind of 6 different points. First one being what a dam is. Second one is like, what does dam management really mean? We're going to look at how to plan a manageable dam, how to create, document, and apply effective standards, how to govern your dam, and then finally, we'll open it up to some Q&A, as I mentioned. So just to set the foundation for this webinar, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page in understanding what a dam is and provide a quick summary of how they work. So as I mentioned earlier, DAM stands for Digital Asset Management, and is a software platform that allows organizations to store, search, approve, create, and tag their digital assets. Not only that, but some dams also allow users to make edits and changes to their assets within the dam itself. So what is dam management really all about? A lot of people who are new to using a dam might think that you just dump all your assets in there and you are good to go. However, in order to maximize your dam's potential, you really do need to properly manage it. This is not a set it and forget it kind of system, and it does require proper upkeep and maintenance to be effective. We see the best success with our customers when they implement a plan that not only includes getting their assets onto the platform, but who have a continual plan to kind of keep their dam organized and explore what their dam can actually do for them. So I'm going to bring up a quick poll question, and you should see it pop up on your screen in just a moment. Whoop. So you guys can just take a second here to vote. Hopefully you can see that. And really just looking to see, do you have a dam in place? How is it working for you? Are you managing it, or has it been more of a set and forget it kind of library situation? And it looks like we've got some results across the board, with the exception of people saying no one so far has said that they don't feel they need one, which is great because that's why we're here. So I'll leave that up for a few extra minutes in case anyone else wants to reply, but I'll keep moving on. So the first thing we're going to talk about, as I mentioned, is just how do you deal with kind of planning a manageable dam? This revolves around the idea, again, that a dam is not just a library for your assets to be accessible by everyone in your organization. So I'm going to turn it over. Actually, before that, we're going to outline some main points in creating this. So first being that you want to identify your stakeholders. You want to understand your users' needs. What do they actually need to get out of the dam? Identify what belongs in the dam. And then creating a workflow. So now I'm going to turn it over to our Stacks team, and with, just kind of looking at what are some of the questions that organizations should be asking themselves when they are planning their dam.
Yeah, so one of the first and most important things to do in planning for a manageable dam. I'm getting a message that my internet connection is unstable, so stop me if you can't hear me or anything like that. Sorry. Small town internet. So sorry. Like I said, one of the first things to do in planning for a manageable dam is to identify your stakeholders. Your dam is a program, not a one-off project. And the more insight you have into your users, in your assets, and where your organization is heading, the more successful it will be. So kind of understanding who in your organization has that valuable insight and knowledge is going to be, so identifying these stakeholders should ideally be done before you choose a dam, as they can help to create that vision for the whole program. Whoever they are, they should have decision-making power in your organization, have a clear understanding of your digital assets and the processes around them, as well as insight into your users. When identifying these people, some questions to ask are who's going to be benefiting from it, who's going to be contributing to it, who will be managing it, and then who will be using it regularly. So once you've done that, the next step is to understand your users. What will they need from the dam? What are the main capabilities that the dam will need to do? What taxonomy and metadata will ensure an efficient user experience? Who will need access to what assets? Questions like that. Figuring out how to get those answers from your users is going to be super important, because ultimately, if your dam isn't meeting their needs and expectations, they aren't going to use it. So ensuring you prioritize those needs is going to be crucial to the success of the whole program.
Those are some really good points, Maddy. And one thing we see, customers forget to consider when they're looking at bringing on a dam is that it's, like, and we're going to say this probably a lot today, is that it's not just a static library where you can kind of dump all your assets into and forget about it. This is a platform that needs to fit the needs of all the users who will be interacting with it, and to really utilize a dam to its full potential. You need to know kind of the who, when, what, where, why, and how the system is going to be put into place and be used going forward.
Yeah, so some other factors you're going to want to consider are what's going to live in your dam, and then what is the workflow going to look like. So you're going to want to first identify what's going to live in your dam, so that one, you can prepare your dam to manage those types of file formats, but it's also going to help you figure out what your workflow is going to be and what metadata you need to be applying to those assets. We find that brands tend to get stuck on this step, trying to decide what's going to go into their dam. Some brands and organizations are going to only want final assets, while other brands might want working files so that they can incorporate some of their approval workflows to happen within their dam. But what we let them know is ultimately depends on what their vision is for their dam and how it can best fit into their current processes and help them meet their goals. And then after that, you can start figuring out what the workflow is going to look like, figuring out who's going to be uploading, who's going to be approving, and who's going to be applying the metadata. And we find that planning this out ahead of time helps users adopt the dam system so they know how exactly it should fit into their workflow. And we also find that if you start planning out the workflow for them, it avoids them continuing to store assets like outside of the dam.
Thank you. And it's definitely a lot to think about. I know we blew through those questions pretty quick, but there's a fair amount of meat in there to kind of get to. We always work with our customers when they're onboarding with IntelligenceBank to make sure that they aren't putting the cart before the horse. So it's not something that just requires pre-planning, but again, ongoing upkeep to keep it running smoothly. So identifying who's going to take responsibility for each part of the dam is crucial to ensuring that people are using it and not just, again, thinking of it as a dumping ground to throw everything in there. And I think I'm going to say that 100 more times as we go through, because it's so important. So this brings us kind of to that second piece in sort of planning and thinking about planning a manageable dam is creating, documenting, and applying effective standards. So ensuring proper standards are not only in place, but again, are being used is vital to having an optimized dam. So this stage can definitely be a little overwhelming, but with the proper preparation and training, it's one that can really transform the way that you use your dam. So doing a little back-end work can really pay off for your organization and use the system to its full potential. So Maddy and Andrea, could you expand a little bit further on this idea?
Yeah, so the idea is that all three of these components work together to create an effective dam program if they're properly maintained. You can create and document as many standards and best practices as you want, but at the end of the day, if you don't apply them and have those permissions in place and you're continually monitoring that and updating it, you won't fully see the value of any of them. So the goal with creating, documenting, and applying these standards is to add valuable, searchable, and consistent information to all of your assets and the workflow surrounding them. Of course, we know that's easier said than done, but kind of doing that initial work of planning out those standards is going to be critical to your long-term success. So when it comes to actually planning them out, the goal should be to create these standards that support your organization in its current state, while also allowing for some room for future growth. You want to create a taxonomy that's intuitive, it isn't too complicated, and like I keep mentioning, it keeps your users in mind. Some best practices when developing these standards are to decide which metadata fields are required, if any, what's the minimum amount of information you want on all the assets, and then whether or not those fields are going to be controlled with predefined values, so you can avoid errors like misspellings or any inconsistencies in language. You also want to create file naming conventions, a folder structure your users would search for your assets, and let that drive a lot of your metadata decisions. Consistent metadata will allow for consistent search results and ensure your users are getting accurate information every time.
You probably see me nodding my head. I could not agree more. And I think, the focus on consistency is really important, and making sure that everyone across the team is uploading consistently, but also, it helps with when you're searching to know what you should be searching for. I think that when, people start to see that a little back-end work can really pay off tenfold once you have it in place and, are actioning it. One of the selling points with our DAM with IntelligenceBank is the robust metadata capabilities. So again, seeing you speak to this really hits home. Andrea, anything to add?
Yeah, so another standard you're going to want to map out is your process for uploading and applying metadata. This kind of goes back to our conversation about workflow. It's important to figure out who's going to be uploading and who's going to be approving and doing all that. But you're going to also want to map out what steps they'll have to take to do that. One way that we help our clients figure this out is by creating a best practice guide. This is a living document that lays out the roles and responsibilities, the approval processes, your assets lifecycle, and the uploading process. Mapping this all out allows for not only easy training, because if you get a new user who's going to be responsible for one of these roles, they know exactly what they need to do, but it also sets clear expectations so that nothing falls through the cracks.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. And I think, again, like the backbone of having a successful process is just making sure that everyone's on the same page and clear on what they need to do and who's responsible.
So the last component you're going to want to establish are your user groups and your permissions. This is going to obviously make sure that your assets are safe and they're being used correctly. I would say the two biggest mistakes that we see brands and organizations make around user groups and permissions is one, not utilizing user groups or not maintaining them. I always recommend using user groups versus applying permissions one user at a time, just because it saves a lot of time. And it makes it easier to manage. If you get a new user that needs to be added to the DAM, you're just adding them to the group. And then when you need to remove them, you're just removing them from the group instead of going folder by folder. And then the next step would be to make sure that you're maintaining those because it's going to make sure that your assets are secure and that they aren't accidentally misused. But it's also going to make a cleaner experience for your end users. If you're not updating their permissions, they might have a really crowded view when they go into the DAM if they're seeing extra folders and assets they're not supposed to have access to.
Yeah, those are really good points. And I think, being able to categorize groups and permissions is something that can help a team, assigned to handle the assets, a little peace of mind that, people are only seeing what they should be seeing. In our book of business, we handle a lot of really heavily regulated industries. So security is often, top of mind for us when it comes to DAM setup and management. So this brings us neatly to our last talking point for today, which is governing your dam. So we've seen teams that put that put a bit of a task force together to get this done. And they've historically been teams that have done really well and get the most out of their dam. Governing your dam is an extremely important part of implementing a dam, even if you're not in a highly regulated industry. So the 4 main points we've outlined here are establishing a dam team, establishing regular taxonomy, assets, users, and permission audits, figuring out your asset governance, and then ensuring your copyright and usage terms are up to date. So Andrea and Maddy, could you give us some insight into each of these points and just, what successful dam governance might look like?
Yeah, so like you said, Suzie, governance is super important, and it's also something that gets overlooked quite often. So going back to your dam being a program and not a project, it needs to be maintained. There needs to be that oversight. And standards, users, and permissions should always be changing and evolving, just like your organization. So establishing a team, doing regular audits, governing your assets, ensuring accurate copyright and usage information. Those are some of the best ways to plan ahead and properly govern your dam. So the foundation of governance is ensuring you have a dam manager, or at least a dam team that will be responsible for the dam. Someone that this is what they're focusing on. The important thing is that there's time allotted for maintaining it. We see it happen often where companies buy these systems and they put a lot of effort into setting them up, but then they don't factor in the time it takes to actually maintain it. So what typically happens is one person inherits this responsibility in addition to their already full-time workload. And of course, that leads to all sorts of issues, but ultimately to the dam not performing how the users need it to. So to ensure your dam program is working effectively, you'll need to establish someone who's responsible for it. Some tasks they might be responsible for are managing the assets, maybe applying the metadata, any permission management, implementing those, any change management that happens. They could be responsible for uploading, taking care of new user onboarding and training, fielding any questions about the dam, conducting those audits we talked about, and then again, like I keep stressing, understanding your users' needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you really hit the nail on the head with this notion of needing someone to be responsible like after implementation. And it is a living, breathing, piece of software. And having a dam team especially is an excellent way to make sure that, one, there's accountability and a process in place, but also that it's not all falling on a single individual. Not to say that, having a dam manager isn't, not to say you need a team and not just a dam manager, but I think allocating and being aware that, there is going to be some amount of time and effort it takes to manage this and maintain it is important, and it is worth kind of allocating and blocking off.
Yeah, so some other areas of governance that you're going to want to focus on are audits and asset governance. We like to conduct audits on the dams that we manage just to ensure that the metadata is staying accurate and consistent. It can also help identify if the taxonomy is still supporting your organization's needs and workflows. But overall, it's just going to make sure that it's running smoothly. So taking the time to do this extra work periodically will just help your dam program run well into the future. The frequency of when you do audits kind of depends on how often you're uploading, and obviously it depends on the workflow of your dam manager or the team that's managing your dam. So it can be anywhere from monthly, quarterly to annually. I think the important piece is just picking a frequency and then sticking to it. And obviously, if you start off doing monthly, you might realize that you don't need to do it monthly. So you can switch to quarterly or just adjust as needed. Just making sure that they happen. And then for asset governance, when I'm talking about asset governance, I'm talking about your assets that are restricted or more sensitive than some of your other assets. So first, identifying to see if you have any of these assets that fall into these categories. And then if you do, just creating a plan to make sure that they stay secure. That plan might be making somebody responsible for overseeing and managing those to make sure they don't fall through the cracks. Or that plan could be figuring out if your dam has a feature that can automate any of this. So maybe you can set up a notification to alert you when the copyright's going to expire, just utilizing all the features and capabilities of your dam to make sure that these assets stay managed.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think keeping that conversation going around regular audits, like again, like I said, I've said it's about 100 times already, but I think it's important to realize that that dam is not a set it and forget it type of product. And you do want to go in and put a little bit of effort in and put a little love in to clean it up, check on things, make sure that, you know, the systems that you have in place are still working, that the taxonomy and structure that you had in place is still relevant and applicable. And I think, you know, having a set schedule for an audit is extremely useful. Monthly would probably be the dream. I think more commonly it's going to fall to, you know, maybe quarterly, most likely annually, which even still is a whole lot better than nothing, to just set that cadence and have it be at a time that maybe things are a little bit quieter in the organization. You can take some time to do it, or maybe it works out with, you know, some sort of timing in your regular business year, but super important to do. And it's just easier to stay on top of things.
So the last area of governance you'll want to consider is copyright and usage terms. And these are critical to keeping your organization out of legal trouble and ensuring that your assets are used correctly every single time. That being said, this is also one of the more complicated areas. And if this information isn't available to your users and updated based on those terms or those timeframes, your users could end up using them incorrectly. So fortunately today, though, DAMs do have a lot of features and automations to help you monitor these. Things like banners, expiration notifications, and then with permissions, you can get really granular on who even has access to view your more sensitive assets. But again, these features and automations are often dictated by your metadata to make sure that they're working properly. So it's crucial that that information is applied when you have it, ideally at the time of upload before they even make it into the DAM, and then regularly audited and updated as necessary. Some questions to ask about these things are if these audits need to happen, and if when these usage terms expire, or you're no longer allowed to use them, are these assets going to be archived, and then who's going to be responsible for doing that?
Yeah, thanks, Maddy. And circling back to a point I mentioned earlier, you know, our niche with Intelligence Bank is, you know, working with really heavily regulated industries. So this is a huge piece of what we do and what we focus on. And it comes up very often in a lot of our conversations with customers. And it, you know, it goes beyond permissions and version control. And it's really just about keeping your organization compliant through the entire lifetime of your asset. And, you know, as much as it is on the legal side externally, it's also, I think, you know, when your team and your users know that what they have access to, they're able to use, there's a lot of peace of mind that that offers. So they're not worrying about, oh, do I have access to use this or not? Do I, you know, can I not? And it just really clears things up, and it's, you know, peace of mind all around. Awesome. So we've come to the end of the presentation and wanted to open it up for any questions that the audience might have. And while those kind of start coming in, I did want to ask a question to the Stacks team. Within your book of clients, what would you say the most DAM sort of successful ones have done right? And how has it changed the way they do business, you know, regarding their assets?
Yeah, so I would say our damn successful ones are the ones who took the time to make a really robust taxonomy and metadata plan that not only supports their organization, but also supports their workflows. And so one client that comes to mind is after they've implemented, they do have a robust taxonomy that supports their workflows. And one thing that they've been able to do is automate the kind of like streamline their workflows and make them more efficient. So one thing they did is they automated the process of uploading. So anytime an asset gets approved, it automatically gets added to the DAM. And then we apply the metadata and it gets added a lot quicker than maybe some of their old processes before their DAM. It's also made it so that they're able to reuse a lot more of their assets because now users have access to all these assets and they're able to repurpose them a lot quicker. And then once they do repurpose them, they're able to add them back into the DAM as a new asset so that that cycle can continue and people can keep repurposing assets and without having to go to other coworkers or departments to get those assets. But yeah, I think just having like a taxonomy that supports your workflows, but also having somebody that can help manage the DAM and keep it clean and moving.
Yeah, to add on to that too, I think a lot of our successful customers are the ones that have like clearly defined roles around the DAM. So they know exactly who's going to be doing the uploading. They know exactly who's going to be tagging, who's going to be auditing, who's going to be updating those usage rights. It's very clearly mapped out for them, so kind of nothing falls through the cracks. And then they've also, if they realize that they don't have the bandwidth, they outsource that to people like us, like fractional DM managers, who can kind of take that on instead of piling it on to someone in their organization who already has that full-time workload.
Awesome, thank you. And so we've got a question that came in, and I'll throw it to you guys first, but what would you say is a good starting point if someone wants to update their DAM? Like if they have one and after sitting through us talk about all of these things, they're going, oh, maybe we need to do, a bit of a refresh or a bit of cleanup. What would you say, like, where would you kind of help them to start with that process?
Yeah, I'll take this one because I definitely pointed to this a lot when I spoke, but definitely checking in with your users to see what they think. They have a lot of good insight, especially if they're using it regularly, on what's working and what's not working. So to be able to kind of pull that information out of them and then make a roadmap based on those bigger pain points, I think is the best way to go, because your users are the ones using it. They're going to know, like I said, what's working, is not working, and they're going to give you the best feedback on that.
Awesome. I love that you started there. And I think that's so important. One of the things we talk about a lot in our implementations is like, we can set up the best system in the world and like what we think is the best, but if our users aren't going to use it, there's no point. Like it doesn't make any difference. And so when it comes to user adoption and getting the system up and running, oftentimes we want to start at the end and like work our way backwards, because, especially if you've got a DAM team or a DAM manager, it's not always, they might not be the ones who are using it. So what makes sense to them? Like they might know all of the assets that are in there. It might be totally logical as to what they have, but if the end users aren't familiar with it or aren't using it in the same way, it might not make sense to set it up, one way versus another. So love that you started there. All right. Is there anything else you guys wanted to touch on that we may have missed through the presentation?
No, I think if anything, that was probably a lot to digest. So
yeah.
Definitely kind of reviewing the information we did and kind of going step by step, taking it one step at a time. Don't feel like you have to be masters of any of this, but kind of taking baby steps to make sure that you at least touch on a lot of these points, I think is a good place to start.
Yeah, I agree. Just like not biting off too much in the first go, just taking it step by step. Because as you can see, it does kind of sound overwhelming if you think about it all together at once.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining as well. As a reminder, we will be sending out a recording of this to everyone who registered. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and follow up. And take care, and remember to take care of your DAM. Have a great day, everybody.